Hi, welcome to Eugene Regional Accelerator's Founders Fireside Chat today. I'm Shane Johnson, and with me is Caine O'Brien. Sorry, we've been chatting before the camera came on. He's the CEO of Visual Robotics, and I will leave it to him to explain what Visual Robotics does.
Well, we're in the business of making 3D vision guidance systems for robots, industrial robots. Industrial robots typically are a single robot arm that picks something up and moves it. And most of the time they're programmed to just go from one specific location to another specific location, and they have no awareness of their environment. By building a visual system, the robot becomes a lot more flexible. It can pick things up in various locations. It can assess the scene, if you will. And that makes robots more adaptable. It increases their throughput. They're more flexible. They can be used for an array of applications instead of just a single application.
Okay. So typically what we talk about is not what you do, but sort of some of the background around your business. So how did you become involved with Visual Robotics?
Well, that's actually a great Rain story because I had sold a previous company and was taking a couple of years off and ended up mentoring here at Rain, helping various business teams figure out their plans. And one of those was a company originally called Realize LLC that was interested in doing consulting and possibly building a product in this space. The founder, Brian Olmsted, had come through last year's cohort in Rain. And after getting through it, he realized, yes, he wanted to own a business, but no, he didn't want to run one. And we met through that process. I was telling him repeatedly, pick a lane, Brian, pick a lane. It's very interesting, all these possibilities, but you got to pick a lane. And he said, well, how'd you like to join me and be our CEO? So that's how that came to be.
So how was, in your previous company that you sold, how is this version of Caine different than that version of Caine?
Well, a lot more gray hair, older and wiser, but it's further down the road, right? So I joined Real Pro Systems in 2006 as the general manager, and it was an 8-person company where I was employee number 8. So it wasn't, strictly speaking, a startup. We had a revenue stream, we had some product, we were out in the market, but we built that up to 45 people at the peak, about 40 when we sold it. And everybody got a nice payout selling it to private equity, and so that was a good run. Coming into this situation now, I've been through a successful exit. In a previous life, I had also raised venture capital, but that was 4th round, established company, etc. So I have that background, but I had not actually been in a ground-up startup before. And so this is my first opportunity. The idea that in a startup you all lick stamps, that's familiar and comfortable, and that's as you'd expect it to be. And Brian wears all the technical hats and I wear all the business hats. So sales, marketing, systems, operations, accounting, finance, all of that is my purview. And that was familiar because that was pretty much what I did at Real Pro Systems. So some different, some new. The other thing I love is I do have hardware in my background. I was at one time a bench technician, among other things, and then a field engineer for computer systems when you had to be an engineer. And I finally get to bring all of that back because this is a hardware and software product offering and product development process. So a bit of a mixed answer there.
No, that was actually, it leads me to the next question is, so you've sort of grown in your background and now you're like pretty much a day zero founder. What are the challenges that are different from when you joined a company that had a revenue stream, whatever, and don't say money. Because you've been all through this, and each layer has a different set of challenges.
Yeah, you say don't say money, but the fact is we had to put together a seed round and go entice investors, including Coast to Crest, as well as friends and family, and now other venture funds, to trust us enough to put money into our business. And I didn't have to do that before at Real Pro Systems. So that was the biggest challenge because we couldn't hire people till we had the money. Brian and I worked free for 9 months, but which comes out of our personal accounts. But that's not the same as hiring somebody. When you need to pay somebody $75,000 to take a job, you have to get that money from somewhere. So that is the single biggest difference and biggest challenge in starting from scratch. We've been fortunate that, kind of like paving the road 2 feet in front of the car that's driving down it, that we've been able to keep the the investment coming in, and it looks like we're going to be able to do that all the way to revenue. But that is the single biggest challenge that we've had. Second, technology development has its pitfalls.
Right.
Brian is a seasoned inventor with an awful lot of experience and accomplishments to his credit. But no matter how much you think you understand, and I do the exact same thing, you sometimes miss details. And so that's the nature of a technical beast. I remember you telling me 9 months ago, yeah, you think you'll be at revenue in 5 months, but it isn't really going to go that way, and you were right. But I consider that conventional or normal execution. I don't see any of that as being a particularly threatening experience for us. Third thing that I was able to bring, I've managed software teams before, and that's not Brian's thing at all. He's the first to tell you software, and so it was a new thing for him to realize, okay, there is another approach, and we can have responsible software people, and maybe I got to release a little bit and trust Caine to figure that out. And yeah, normal stuff really, though, execution at that stage.
So you've grown a company from 8 to 40. Now you've grown a company from 2 to 4? 5?
No, we have 6 full-time and 3 part-time.
Okay. So are there differences in the people you look for from 8 to 40 versus
What
2?
a great question. That's just such a great question, and maybe you know where I'm going with this. But the reason that's so important is in a startup, you really need senior people as your first hires because they've been through it before, they know what they're doing, they don't have to figure out the basics of software development or what's a good configuration management strategy or what's a good documentation strategy. They already know that. They have professional practices down pat. Well, they're more expensive than youngsters that are getting their first real job. So, I learned long ago, that doesn't mean I've always followed my own advice, but I learned long ago the 2 biggest causes of failure are not being adequately funded and going into a business you've never been in before. And so in our case, not having the infrastructure of stuff already in place, we had to hire people that knew how to be infrastructure creators, and that's a different skill set from cranking out a little bit of software.
Yeah, and this is an important part of this. In a startup, you have minimal resources, but resources diminish with time, even if you husband them, right?
Sure.
So spending money on a senior developer, you may appear to shorten your runway, but it actually has more value creation.
It's not only that, but for example, we just recently hired a senior mechanical engineer. This guy's out of aerospace. He's our most expensive employee. He's a good guy, but you pay for that kind of experience, right? We weren't going to go to market with a product that could get bashed around on the end of a robot arm at up to 8 Gs of force continually day in and day out unless we had somebody of that skill set reviewing the mechanical design to make sure it was going to hold up. So it does shorten your runway in terms of funding, but we're continually in the mode of let's fly this plane off the cliff and see if the wings hold.
Right.
That is the nature of startups, and if you're not comfortable with that kind of risk, you probably don't want to work at a startup.
So, to switch gears a little bit, sales and marketing, I know that's one of your strengths. How is it different in a day zero startup versus that 8 to 40 person startup in, doing marketing, doing sales calls? How do you establish those relationships when you're...
Well, first we had to establish a brand. So when I joined the company, we recast the company to become Visual Robotics, and we had a specific market segment that we were focusing on, industrial robots, and how to make them more efficient and more effective. We had to build the messaging template all around that. So how are we going to talk about it? Which lane are we in? Which lane are we not in? Who cares? What's your value proposition? What's the benefit that you're bringing in? All of that. You can't make a sales call until you have that.
Right.
So I'm not the world's greatest graphic artist or any of the rest of the execution pieces, but you dust off your old skills because you can't afford to have somebody else do it, and you do the best you can. So we have a reasonable brand established. I've been publishing videos showing our functionality, etc. And that gives you the substrate or the foundation from which you can then begin to launch sales calls. So our goal is to sell through systems integrators. They're going to be resellers of our product. To the extent that we hire salespeople, they will be calling on system integrators, not on the end users of our product. And so the advantage there is you have somebody that understands your business, they understand your competition possibly better than you do, and you have to come in with a clear technical proposition as well as a business proposition. And our sales efforts are really just getting going now. I mean, we've had relationships with a couple of integrators who have been very supportive and very helpful, but it's a whole lot different when you have the brand established already versus when you don't. And so I feel like now we've gotten that to the 90% point where we can then use that as a launching pad for day-to-day sales activities.
This is going to be kind of a tweener question between what you're doing now and mentoring in your experience. Because one of the things that I get a lot with mentoring, people say we need to build brand, but they don't really know what that means. And, so they go off half-cocked with some perception versus having a structured, basically a brand book in how they're going to talk about their product. In your experience talking to startups, has that been a problem? What's your advice to give to other startups around that?
You teach at Rain, and everyone teaches the importance of an elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is a deliverable that's the outcome of a lot of time spent staring at a whiteboard. And the way I think about it is you have to figure out what problem you're trying to solve, for whom. Ask yourself the most malicious two-word question you can: who cares? When you pitch what you think is brilliant, have somebody else say to you, who cares? And you keep pressing on that. So the way I like to model it, it's so simple, but I do everything simple, is I put a target on the wall of concentric circles. You have a bullseye. Who's my perfect customer? They have this much money, they have this interest, they have this need, they have this pain point, they have all of this stuff. All the stars align. That's like the sweetest sweet spot you could ask for. Then the next concentric ring is lacking one or two of those attributes that you think are important. And that you have to decide what's not on the target, what's not on target. And the most common mistake, and Michael Moore really spelled this out in his book, Crossing the Chasm, the most common problem is everybody wants to reach for whatever looks like a revenue opportunity, and they don't understand, and it's hard, believe me, I know, I'm living it now, they don't understand the importance of saying no to business that's off target. Because when you marshal all your resources and you focus toward that narrow positioning, that narrow focus, then you can actually offer a really satisfying solution to that smaller market segment. When you got that proof point and that revenue stream started, then you have the base to build from to go to the next concentric ring and so forth. So bottom line, you think you have a great idea. If you can't articulate who cares and why, you probably want to rethink your idea. And the who cares ought to be in layers of caring until you get to the I gotta have it. Who's gotta have it?
Okay. Yeah. You said a word, focus, which I've been using a lot lately with a lot of people I've been talking to, and usually it's focus, focus, focus. Because in my experience, one of the things that derails startups more than anything is chasing revenue into adjacent markets or where they think something came in over the transom and it's going to be an easy opportunity. And, one of the things that I've seen and even done, frankly, is have a hot deal over here, and then this big opportunity comes over and you try to put it on hold. This falls through, and then this is falling through.
I'm going through a situation like that right now, and you've been tracking the history of this because this is a large corporation that's interested in what we're able to do, and it's too large a corporation to ignore on the one hand, and on the other hand, it was quite off target initially. But as we've defined our product and our infrastructure, we're now to the point where the percentage that's off target is in the range of what a system integrator would typically add as their special sauce. Right. In this case, we'll be adding the special sauce, but it's 10% customization, but everything is built on our standard product. Right. And a second situation arrived today just before I came in. I had a call with a company in a business area that I didn't think we'd ever get involved in. And the exact same question, how much of this is custom versus how much of this is actually using our standard product with just a little tweak that anybody could offer? And so I think you're right. I think that there's this tendency also to make bad deals early. If you're selling B2B, I've lived through this movie with another company, not that I was responsible for, of course, but where another company, a major corporation, bought this company's software and got a site license for the whole company for 20 cents on a dollar. Okay? Now, when you're starving startup, 20 cents on a dollar sounds like a great deal. Well, this company went on to acquire other companies, and we had sales channel conflict throughout the United States because, oh, no, this is subject to this big, giant deal. We came to rue that deal.
So, in your experience, what it really sounds like is sticking to your value. What is the value you're delivering? So, when you're out talking to a customer or whatever, do you talk to them about, like, really get into the value of what you're doing for them, the value of what you're providing?
The answer is yes. In fact, it's a timely question because I'm now crafting the last piece of our branding, which is a tagline. Okay. And we could go 100 different directions with Visual Robotics. We could brag about our technology, we could brag about our speed, we could brag about everything. We're in the productivity business. Right. So we're considering a slogan now, which is productivity delivered. Okay. All right? Well, that's our value proposition. So 4 words: Visual Robotics, company name, productivity delivered. Right. It's not too hard to figure out what the value proposition is, and I don't even need an elevator speech, right? Right. So in the robot world, they're used typically on manufacturing lines or packaging lines where the number of things you can move down the line in an hour is how you measure success, coupled with failure rate if there's a problem there, right? And so to the extent that we can increase the throughput on a robot line, that's a demonstrable ROI, and our industry typically sells solutions with an ROI justification before the customer even buys in. So one of the value proposition things I came to realize was we were contemplating going out with too low a price. Why? Because of our value proposition. Our vision system can speed up an existing brand of robot by as much as double, maybe even more, for some common operations. Well, does the difference of $4,000 in the price of our product mean anything for a company that's going to be able to run twice as much or 50% more down the same line? Right. It's inconsequential. Right. So that is part of the value is, do you want this line to run 50% faster? It's a pretty easy proposition, right?
Yeah. It's always interesting because early stage companies are always trying to get that first deal. And they forget the value they're bringing in that first deal. They just want some revenue or something like that. So a lot of times they do get that 20 cents on the dollar deal, which is, it's just going to be a partnership that lasts for a few months.
Well, I think I may have shared this with you, but this company that we're now negotiating around for a slightly custom solution, they're a major marquee brand that all of you would recognize. They originally approached us with a contract that said we were giving them a 2-year exclusivity in their industry, and they gave us a list of 300 competitors that we would not be allowed to do business with. Now, if I had any doubt about my value proposition, they just cleared it up for me right there, right? And so I'm eating my own dog food, folks. I told them no. And it's not easy to do, to walk away from one of the premier brands in the world and say, no, I'm not going to do that deal. And so it's been 6 months of back and forth through legal, and the last round was our terms, which is what we wanted, right? But 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 30 years ago, I might not have had the courage of my convictions to say no. I might have made that bad deal. And I'm really glad that I have a partner that backs me up on these things. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that you've done is, while you're doing this, you're doing other things. This is not like one or the other,
no,
or gated at behavior, because that's one of the other traps, right? And you might have seen this previously in other businesses where people wait for something to happen so they can do something else.
Oh, if you want to score a goal in soccer, how many runs do you take to the goal? You don't just kick once and then wait and see what happens, right? If I don't even like boxing or anything violent, but If a guy manages to land a left hook and stuns his opponent, he doesn't then stand back to watch what happens. He moves in and pummels, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing in sales and marketing. You can't do one thing and wait to see what happens. You have to be pushing on 10 fronts, and one of those will turn into a deal, or one of those will turn into the partnership that you want.
Right. So I think we're getting close to being done, but one of the questions I like to ask everybody is, right now, what's the thing you lose sleep over in the context of your startup? What's the sort of that you would like more information on so you could deal with it thing?
Well, the reality is with 9 employees, now you have 9 households that are affected by whether we're a viable business or not. And so any conscientious manager of a company is always thinking about payroll and how do I ensure I either have the revenue or I have the investment or some combination of the two to ensure that. So if I didn't tell you that was the first thing, I'd be a liar. Beyond that, it's just the anticipation of how quickly can we get to market. Am I over-optimistic in my revenue projections? Am I under-optimistic in the potential for the business? Those kinds of things.
So, given your experience, you've done multiple companies in leadership roles. What are some of the things you've had to sort of lead by example or explain to people who are new to a startup? You've already talked about senior lead level employees, right? They can create process, or they're comfortable even working without it too, right?
Right.
There's that weird balance.
Yeah.
What are some of the things? I'm assuming not all of them have been in an early stage startup company. What are some of the things that you've had to talk to them about in terms of, how this is going to work?
Well, both my last company and this one, I've been the champion for written processes and procedures and systems and tools to support them. So we're the biggest little company that doesn't even have revenue yet. I've got systems in place today with an increasing volume of knowledge-based articles explaining how we do things on each of these segments, from CRM to order processing to inventory, purchasing, support, etc. I could go on and on. But I believe soup to nuts, having those systems in place now and those processes in place and having created that culture already when we're tiny means I don't have to fight to have that going forward.
Right.
I've been in other situations where we were 20 people and I tried to introduce that and there's resistance. For very little money, I'm using Zoho company-wide. In the entire Zoho One suite's $35 a person. Everybody must be licensed. That's their licensing rule. So $300 a month or whatever I'm spending on that, but maybe even $400. But guess what? Everybody's going to use it for some, set of processes. So It's invaluable. And so systems and processes is the 2-word answer to your question.
So culture, you said that word. Every company has a different culture, and I look at it as it's based on the values of the leadership in general. So when you're hiring somebody and you're talking about culture, and you're talking to them, what's sort of the personal value you're looking for, the set of values in a future employee?
Well, that's a long question that we could do a whole session on, but certainly I'm looking for ethics. I'm looking for somebody who wants to live a balanced life. I actually don't want a workaholic because they're not balanced in other areas of human relations that affect the culture. I want people that deal with each other with respect and demonstrate that. And, it's the little things. It's the courtesy that they extend in an interview. There's 100 different ways that people can express that. Do they give any hint that they're not open-minded or dealing with, diverse workplace? Do they have biases that are going to hinder us? I don't want that. Are they supportive of other people? Are they the kind of person that finger points, or are they the kind of person that volunteers to help? These are important things.
Okay, so to finish up, what in the next 6 months, what's the thing you're most looking forward to?
Well, revenue.
Yeah.
It's not about getting rich. It's about getting out of the infant stage and to the point where this is a viable organism. where we have the market validation, which makes the next round of fundraising that much easier and at much better terms. We've already gotten enough, one-to-one validation that we're absolutely confident we have a thing, and it's a thing that we can really make a dent in the market. But to believe that, to know it viscerally, is different from experiencing it when it actually happens. And so the next 6 months, getting to revenue, I think will be to profitability, where we have the option of being a sustained company, or more likely, if we've hit that milestone, we're going to want to go get a big investment from venture capital, 7-figure, possibly 8-figure, and go hit it hard, because it's all about first mover advantage right now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I actually learned a lot about you, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.